Sometimes the most profound truths come from the smallest voices. In a world where adults often dismiss children's words as imagination, what happens when a 7-year-old girl speaks with the certainty of someone who has seen beyond the veil of ordinary reality? This is the story of Sarah Chun, a grieving mother who had buried her hope along with what she believed were her son's remains. It's about Marcus Williams, a father who had spent 3 years searching every shadow and following every dead-end lead. And it's about little Zara, a child whose whispered words in a hospital corridor would unravel a web of lies, expose a trafficking ring, and prove that sometimes miracles were the face of a 7-year-old girl with pigtails and worn-out sneakers. What you're about to read isn't fiction. Every word, every heartbreak, every moment of impossible hope that follows is real. Because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that actually happened. The truth has a way of finding us when we least expect it, often through the most unlikely messengers. Sarah Chin's hands trembled as she held the small plastic cup of hospital coffee. The bitter liquid had grown cold hours ago, but she continued to clutch it like a lifeline. The pediatric ward of St. Mary's Hospital had become her second home over the past 6 months, ever since her daughter Emma had been diagnosed with leukemia. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes and the weight she had lost since Emma's treatment began. 3 years had passed since Sarah had buried an empty casket. 3 years since the police had told her that her son David was dead, killed in what they believed was a random act of violence. The case had gone cold within months, leaving Sarah with nothing but a death certificate and a grave marker that contained no actual remains. They had never found David's body, but the evidence seemed conclusive enough for everyone except Sarah's breaking heart. Emma stirred in the hospital bed, her small head barely making a dent in the pillow. At 8 years old, she looked even smaller than her age, her once thick black hair now just wispy strands after months of chemotherapy. Sarah moved closer to the bed, brushing a gentle hand across Emma's forehead. The fever had broken during the night, which the doctors said was a good sign, but Sarah had learned not to get her hopes up too quickly in this place where hope and despair danced together daily. "Mama," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the steady beep of the monitoring equipment. The little girl was here again. Sarah's heart sank slightly. Emma had been talking about this mysterious little girl for weeks now. The doctors said it was normal for children undergoing intensive treatment to have vivid dreams or even hallucinations as side effects of their medication. Sarah had learned to simply listen and comfort her daughter rather than trying to convince her that these visions weren't real. "What did she say this time, sweetheart?" Sarah asked gently, settling into the uncomfortable plastic chair beside the bed. "She said her name is Zara," Emma continued, her eyes still closed but her voice gaining strength. "She's 7, and she has really pretty braids with purple ribbons. She says she lives in the place where the lost children go." Sarah felt the familiar ache in her chest. Emma often spoke about this place, describing it in ways that were both beautiful and heartbreaking. According to Emma, it was somewhere safe where children who couldn't be with their families were taken care of by kind people. Sarah had initially thought these were Emma's way of processing her own fears about death, creating a comforting fantasy about what happened to children who died. "She told me something important, Mama," Emma said, opening her eyes and looking directly at Sarah with an intensity that was startling. "She said to tell you that David is still there. He's still alive." The coffee cup slipped from Sarah's hands, clattering to the floor and splashing the cold liquid across the linoleum. Her heart stopped for a moment before beginning to race wildly. Emma had never mentioned David before in these conversations about the little girl. In fact, Emma rarely spoke about her older brother at all anymore, as if she sensed how much pain the topic caused her mother. "Emma, sweetie," Sarah began carefully, David died 3 years ago. You remember, we talked about this." But Emma shook her head with the stubborn certainty that only a child could possess. "No, Mama. Zara showed me. She showed me the place where he is. It's not the pretty place where the lost children go. It's a scary place with gray walls and lots of other children who are scared too. But David is brave. He takes care of the younger ones." Sarah felt her world tilting off its axis. The details Emma provided were so vivid, so specific. She described David as looking older, his hair longer than it had been when he disappeared. She said he had a small scar above his left eyebrow that hadn't been there before. Most disturbing of all, Emma described the clothes he wore, a red t-shirt with a logo she drew on a napkin that Sarah didn't recognize, and jeans with a specific tear in the right knee. "Emma, where is this place?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady even as her mind raced with possibilities she had forced herself to stop considering years ago. Emma's face scrunched up in concentration. "Zara says it's far away, but not too far. She says there are big trucks that come and go, and the people there are mean to the children. She says David talks about us all the time. He misses us so much, Mama." Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the hospital parking lot. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman aged beyond her 32 years, worn down by grief, and now by the terror of watching her remaining child fight for her life. Could this be real? Could David actually be alive somewhere? The rational part of her mind, the part that had been forced to accept David's death and move forward for Emma's sake, told her this was just her daughter's illness speaking. But there was another part, the part that had never fully believed David was gone, that was screaming with desperate hope. She turned back to Emma, who was watching her with those wise eyes that seemed too old for her small face. "Tell me more about what Zara showed you," Sarah said quietly. Over the next hour, Emma shared details that made Sarah's blood run cold. She described a building that sounded like some kind of warehouse or factory, surrounded by a tall fence with wire on top. She talked about children of different ages, all of them looking sad and scared. Most importantly, she described seeing David through what looked like a small window, sitting in a room with several other boys, all of them working on something with their hands. "He looked right at Zara," Emma said, her voice dropping to a whisper again. "And he said to tell his mama that he's trying to come home. He said to tell you he's sorry he couldn't fight harder that day." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Those words, about fighting harder, those were words David would say. From the time he was small, David had always been protective, always blamed himself when he couldn't fix things for the people he loved. When Sarah and David's father had divorced, David had spent months apologizing for not being able to keep them together. "Emma," Sarah said, kneeling beside the bed and taking her daughter's small hands in hers, "I need you to remember everything Zara shows you, okay? Every single detail, no matter how small it seems." Emma nodded solemnly. "Are you going to find David, Mama?" Sarah looked into her daughter's eyes, seeing hope and fear warring there. She thought about the police officers who had closed David's case, about the investigators who had told her to accept reality and move on. She thought about the empty grave with David's name on it, and the memorial service they had held without a body to bury. But she also thought about the mother's intuition that had never let her fully grieve, the feeling that had always whispered in the back of her mind that David was out there somewhere, waiting for her to find him. "I don't know, baby," Sarah said honestly, "but I'm going to try." That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Sarah sat in the hospital corridor making a series of phone calls. The first was to her sister Linda, asking her to come stay with Emma the next day. The second was to her boss, requesting an extended leave of absence. The third was to Detective Marcus Williams, the only police officer who had ever seemed to truly believe that David's case deserved more attention. Marcus had been the junior detective assigned to David's case 3 years ago. Unlike his partner, Detective Rodriguez, Marcus had never seemed satisfied with the conclusion that David was dead. He had continued following leads long after the case was officially closed, calling Sarah occasionally with updates that led nowhere, but showed he hadn't forgotten about her son. "Mrs. Chun." Marcus's voice was groggy when he answered his phone at nearly midnight. "Is everything all right?" "Detective Williams," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think David might still be alive." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sarah had expected Marcus to respond with the same patient but dismissive tone the other officers had used when she had called with her desperate theories in the months after David's disappearance. Instead, his voice was sharp and alert when he spoke again. "What makes you think that?" Sarah took a deep breath and began to tell him about Emma's visions, about the little girl named Zara, about the details that seemed too specific and accurate to be the product of a sick child's imagination. As she spoke, She realized how insane it all sounded. But Marcus listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was another long silence. Finally, Marcus spoke, and his words changed everything. "Mrs. Chun," he said carefully, "there's something I never told you about David's case. Something that's been bothering me for 3 years." Sarah gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean?" "The evidence that led us to conclude David was dead, it was always circumstantial. We found blood that matched his DNA, torn pieces of his clothing, signs of a struggle. But we never found a body. And there were some inconsistencies that my partner was willing to overlook, but I never could." Marcus went on to explain that in the weeks after David's case was closed, he had begun investigating other missing children cases on his own time. What he had discovered was a pattern that his superiors hadn't wanted to hear about. Children who disappeared under similar circumstances, with similar evidence left behind, but whose bodies were never recovered. "I think there's someone out there who's very good at making it look like children are dead when they're actually being taken," Marcus said. "And if I'm right, and if what your daughter is describing is real, then David and a lot of other children might still be out there." Sarah felt her heart pounding so hard, she was afraid it might wake Emma in the next room. "What do we do now?" "Now," Marcus said, "we follow every lead." No matter how unusual, Detective Marcus Williams arrived at St. Mary's Hospital the next morning carrying a thick manila folder and wearing the determined expression that had made him both respected and unpopular within the police department. His colleagues often said Marcus couldn't let go of cases, that he took things too personally. They were right. When it came to missing children, Marcus had never learned how to accept defeat gracefully. Sarah was waiting for him in the hospital cafeteria, her hands wrapped around another cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She looked like she hadn't slept, which Marcus suspected was true. He had spent most of the night pulling files and making discreet inquiries, following instincts that had been nagging at him for 3 years. "How's Emma today?" Marcus asked as he sat down across from Sarah, setting the folder carefully on the table between them. "Better," Sarah said. "The doctors are optimistic about her latest test results. But that's not why you're here." Marcus opened the folder and spread several photographs across the table. "These are pictures of 5 children who have disappeared in our county and the surrounding areas over the past 4 years," he said quietly. "David is one of them. All 5 cases were closed with the assumption that the children were dead, but none of the bodies were ever found." Sarah studied the photographs, 2 boys and 3 girls, ranging in age from 7 to 14. David's school picture was among them, his bright smile and unruly dark hair achingly familiar. "What connects them?" "More than I realized until I started looking," Marcus said, pulling out a sheet of notes. "All 5 children disappeared during the day, in public places but with no witnesses to the actual abduction. All 5 cases had similar physical evidence, blood, torn clothing, signs of struggle, but no bodies. And all 5 children had something else in common." He paused, looking directly at Sarah. "They were all particularly intelligent, well-behaved kids from stable homes. The kind of children who wouldn't typically run away or get involved in dangerous situations on their own." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "You think someone was specifically targeting children like that?" "I think someone was selecting them," Marcus said grimly. "And I think your daughter might be giving us our first real lead in finding out who." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Linda, who was staying with Emma. "Emma wants to see you. She says Zara is here and has something important to show her." Marcus and Sarah hurried to Emma's room, where they found the little girl sitting up in bed, her eyes closed in concentration. Linda was sitting beside her, looking worried and confused. "She's been like this for about 10 minutes, Linda whispered to Sarah. "Just sitting with her eyes closed, sometimes nodding like she's having a conversation with someone." Sarah approached the bed carefully. "Emma? Sweetheart." Emma's eyes opened, and she looked first at Sarah, then at Marcus with curiosity. "Are you the policeman who's going to help find David?" Marcus knelt beside the bed so he was at Emma's eye level. "I'm Detective Williams, and yes, I'm going to help your mama find David. I heard you have a friend named Zara who's been helping too." Emma nodded seriously. "Zara likes you. She says you have a good heart, and you really care about finding lost children. She wants to show you the place where David is, but she can only show it to me, and then I have to tell you." Can you tell me what you're seeing right now? Marcus asked gently. Emma closed her eyes again. Zara is holding my hand. We're flying really fast over the city. I can see the hospital getting smaller below us. Now we're going past the big shopping mall, past the lake where Daddy used to take us fishing. Sarah exchanged a glance with Marcus. Emma was describing a route that led east out of the city toward the industrial district. We're slowing down now, Emma continued. There are lots of big buildings here, and trucks. Really big trucks. Zara says the bad people use the trucks to move children around when they don't want the police to find them. Marcus pulled out a small notebook and began writing quickly. Can you see any signs or numbers on the buildings? Emma was quiet for a moment. There's a big building with no windows except up high. It has numbers on the side, for -7-8-9. And there's a name, but it's in letters I can't read very well. It starts with an M. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. He knew that area of the city. It was full of warehouses and manufacturing facilities, many of them abandoned or only partially used. A building matching Emma's description would be easy enough to locate. Zara is taking me closer now, Emma said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She's showing me the window where David is. He's in a room with walls that look like metal. There are 8 other children with him, 4 boys and 4 girls. They're all sitting at a long table, and they're working on something with their hands. What are they working on? Sarah asked, her voice tight with emotion. Little things made of wire and colored beads. Zara says they have to make 100 of them every day, and if they don't get dinner. David is helping the youngest girl. She's only about 6, and her fingers are too small to hold the wire right. Emma's face suddenly contorted with distress. David looks sick, Mama. He's too skinny, and he has bruises on his arms. But he's being brave for the little ones. He tells them stories while they work to make them feel less scared. Sarah was crying now. The image of her son caring for other children even while trapped in his own nightmare, both breaking her heart and filling her with fierce pride. Marcus continued writing, capturing every detail. Emma, can you see anything else about the building? Any cars or trucks parked outside? There are 3 big white trucks in a fenced area behind the building, Emma said, and a smaller blue car parked by the door that people use to go in and out. Zara says that's the door the bad people use, but the children never go through that door. She says they only see the sun when they're moved to different buildings. Different buildings? Marcus asked urgently. Zara says there are lots of places like this one. The bad people move children around so no one can find them. She says David has been in 3 different places since they took him. This is the newest one. Marcus felt pieces of a horrific puzzle beginning to come together in his mind. What Emma was describing sounded like a sophisticated operation. Multiple locations, systematic movement of children, organized labor. This wasn't the work of a single predator. This was something much larger and more organized. Emma, Marcus said carefully. Does Zara know how many children are in all these different places? Emma was quiet for a long time, her face growing increasingly troubled. When she spoke again, her voice was so quiet they had to lean in to hear her. She says there are so many she can't count them all. She says some children come and go, but others have been there for a really long time. She says the oldest boy has been there since he was David's age when they took him, and now he looks almost like a grown-up. Marcus and Sarah stared at each other in horror. If what Emma was describing was real, they weren't just dealing with David's case. They were looking at a trafficking operation that could involve dozens or even hundreds of children. There's something else, Emma said suddenly, opening her eyes and looking directly at Marcus. Zara says David heard the bad people talking yesterday. They said they're going to move all the children to a new place soon, somewhere far away. She says if we don't find them soon, we might never be able to find them. Marcus closed his notebook and stood up. Mrs. Chun, I need to make some phone calls. We need to move on this information as quickly as possible. What do we do now? Sarah asked. Now we verify what Emma has told us, Marcus said. I'm going to drive out to that area and look for a building matching her description. If I find it, then we contact the FBI. This is bigger than anything our local department can handle alone. As Marcus prepared to leave, Emma called out to him. Detective Williams? Zara wants me to tell you something else. Marcus turned back to face the little girl. She says you're not the only policeman who cares about finding lost children. She says there's a lady policeman who's been looking for her own lost little boy for 2 years. Zara knows where he is too. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What's this policewoman's name, Emma? Emma closed her eyes briefly. Agent Rodriguez. But not the mean one who worked on David's case. A different Rodriguez. Zara says she works for the FBI, and she's been trying to find these bad people for a long time. Marcus knew exactly who Emma was talking about. Agent Maria Rodriguez had contacted him 6 months ago about patterns in missing children cases. She had lost her own son, Miguel, 2 years earlier under circumstances remarkably similar to David's case. Marcus had shared some of his research with her, but their unofficial collaboration had stalled when both of their official departments discouraged them from pursuing their theories. Tell Zara thank you, Marcus said to Emma, and tell her that we're going to find all the lost children. David, Miguel, and all the others. Emma smiled for the first time since Marcus had arrived. She knows. She says that's why she's helping. She says the lost children have been waiting for someone to believe they're still alive. As Marcus left the hospital, he called Agent Rodriguez on her personal cell phone. When she answered, he could hear the exhaustion in her voice that he recognized from his own sleepless nights. Maria, this is Marcus Williams from Metro PD. I think I might have a lead on Miguel's case. There was a pause. What kind of lead? The kind that's going to sound completely crazy until you hear all the details, Marcus said. How quickly can you get to the city? 3 hours later, Marcus was driving through the industrial district east of the city with Agent Maria Rodriguez in the passenger seat. Maria was a small, intense woman in her mid-30s whose dedication to finding her son had earned her both respect and concern from her superiors at the FBI. Like Marcus, she had been told to move on, to accept reality, to focus on cases she could actually solve. There, Marcus said, pointing to a large, windowless building with faded numbers on the side, 4789. That's got to be it. Maria pulled out a pair of binoculars and studied the building. There are the white trucks Emma described, she said quietly. And there's the blue car by the side entrance. They parked a safe distance away and spent the next hour observing the building. What they saw confirmed their worst fears. Men in casual clothes came and went through the side entrance, but never for very long. The building showed no signs of legitimate business activity, no deliveries, no regular employee shifts, no company signage beyond the faded name Meridian Manufacturing that was barely visible on the front of the building. Most telling of all were the security measures. The building was surrounded by a 12-foot chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Security cameras were mounted at regular intervals, and the few windows visible from ground level were barred. This isn't a manufacturing facility, Maria said grimly. This is a prison. As they watched, one of the white trucks started its engine and began backing up to a loading dock at the rear of the building. Marcus and Maria exchanged a look of alarm. If they're moving children, Marcus said, and Emma's information about them planning to relocate soon is accurate. We need backup, and we need it now, Maria finished. She was already dialing her phone. But if we wait for all the proper channels and warrants, those children could be gone. Marcus was facing the same dilemma. Everything in his training told him to follow protocol, to wait for proper authorization, to build an airtight case. But everything in his heart told him that children's lives were at stake, and time was running out. What are you thinking? Maria asked. I'm thinking that sometimes good cops have to make hard choices. And the emergency meeting took place in Agent Rodriguez's car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner 5 miles from the Meridian Manufacturing building. Maria had called in every favor she was owed, and now 3 FBI agents sat crammed into the vehicle, studying surveillance photos and listening to Marcus recount Emma's visions with expressions that ranged from skeptical to intrigued. Agent Tom Bradley, Maria's former partner who had been reassigned after expressing concerns about her obsession with Miguel's case, kept shaking his head. Maria, I understand you want to believe this, but you're asking us to raid a private building based on the hallucinations of a sick 8-year-old. They're not hallucinations, Marcus said firmly. Emma described details about that building that she could never have known unless someone showed them to her. She knew about the numbers on the side, the fence configuration, even the color and make of the vehicles. Agent Jennifer Walsh, a specialist in human trafficking cases, had been studying the photos Marcus and Maria had taken. The security setup is definitely suspicious, she admitted. This level of fortification for a supposedly defunct manufacturing facility raises red flags. More than that, Maria said, spreading out a map of the metropolitan area. I've been tracking patterns for 2 years. Look at this. She had marked dozens of locations with different colored pins. Red pins showed where children had disappeared. Blue pins showed abandoned or underutilized industrial buildings. Yellow pins marked locations where there had been reports of unusual truck traffic or suspicious activity. I found 17 buildings in a 50-mile radius that matched the pattern, Maria continued. High security, minimal legitimate activity, located in areas where truck traffic wouldn't attract attention. If this really is an organized operation, Meridian Manufacturing could be just one piece of a much larger network. Agent Walsh studied the map with growing interest. Have you investigated any of these other locations? Informally, Maria said. I've driven by most of them, taken photos, noted patterns of activity. But I haven't had enough evidence to justify official surveillance or search warrants. Agent Bradley was still shaking his head. Even if you're right about the larger pattern, we can't just storm a building because a child claims to have psychic visions about it. Before anyone could respond, Marcus's phone rang. It was Sarah, calling from the hospital. Emma just woke up from another vision, Sarah said without preamble. She says Zara showed her something terrible. The bad people know someone has been watching the building. They're moving the children tonight. Marcus put the phone on speaker so the FBI agents could hear. What exactly did Emma see? She says the man in charge got a phone call about an hour ago. After that, all the adults started running around, packing things up. She says they're loading the children into the trucks right now, and David is trying to keep the younger ones calm. Agent Walsh leaned forward. Did she see which direction the trucks are heading? Sarah relayed the question to Emma, and they could hear the little girl's voice in the background, faint but clear. Zara says they're taking them north, toward the mountains. She says there's another building there, but this one is much worse. She says children who go there don't come back. The 4 law enforcement officers exchanged grim looks. If Emma's information was accurate, they were facing an immediate crisis. Children could be disappearing into a network they might never be able to track again. How long do we have? Maria asked. Emma says the trucks are loading now, but they won't leave until it gets completely dark. Zara says the bad people always move children at night, so fewer people will see. Marcus looked at his watch. It was nearly 6 p.m., and sunset wasn't for another hour. That gives us maybe 2 hours before those children are gone forever. Agent Bradley was on his phone, speaking rapidly to someone at FBI headquarters. When he finished the call, his expression was troubled. I explained the situation to my supervisor. He's willing to authorize surveillance of the building, but not a raid. He wants more evidence before we take action. More evidence, Marcus said angrily. How much more evidence do we need? We have a building that matches the description given by a witness, suspicious activity, patterns that connect to multiple missing children cases and our witness is an 8-year-old girl with leukemia who claims to be receiving psychic messages from another child. Agent Bradley interrupted. Do you understand how that sounds in a court of law? Maria had been studying the map again, and now she looked up with a determined expression. Tom, what if we could verify Emma's information before the trucks leave? How? Surveillance equipment, Maria said. High-powered cameras, listening devices, thermal imaging if we can get it. If there really are children in that building, we should be able to prove it without going inside. Agent Walsh nodded slowly. That could work. If we can document evidence of children being held against their will, that would be enough to justify immediate action. And if we're wrong? Agent Bradley asked. Then, we'll have embarrassed ourselves by conducting surveillance on an empty building, Maria said. But if we're right, and we do nothing, children are going to disappear forever. Marcus was already standing up. I'm going back to that building with or without official authorization. I've been looking for David Chun for 3 years, and I'm not going to lose him now because of red tape. Agent Bradley sighed. Marcus, if you go in there without proper authorization, anything you find could be thrown out in court. You could destroy the entire case. Not if I don't go inside, Marcus said. I'll stay on public property and observe from a distance. If I see evidence of children being moved against their will, that's probable cause for immediate action. Maria was gathering up the maps and photos. I'm going with him. Maria Agent Bradley started. Miguel is my son, Maria said quietly. For 2 years, I've followed every lead, pursued every possibility, hoping to find some trace of him. This is the first real hope I've had that he might still be alive. I'm not walking away now. Agent Walsh stood up as well. You'll need backup. If this situation goes bad, you'll want professional support. Agent Bradley looked at his 3 colleagues, recognizing the determination in their faces that he had seen too many times before. When cops became emotionally invested in cases, especially cases involving children, they sometimes made decisions that their training told them were wrong, but their hearts told them were necessary. If we're going to do this, he said finally, we're going to do it right. I'll coordinate with local SWAT units and make sure we have backup standing by. But I want everyone to understand. If this goes sideways, our careers are over. If we don't try and those children disappear, I won't be able to live with myself anyway, Maria said. As the 4 officers prepared to return to the Meridian Manufacturing building, Marcus called Sarah back. We're going to try to verify Emma's information tonight. If she has any more contact with Zara, we need to know immediately. She's resting now, Sarah said. But, Detective Williams? Emma wanted me to tell you something. She says Zara is proud of you and Agent Rodriguez for believing her. She says most adults stopped listening to her a long time ago. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What does she mean by that? Emma says Zara has been trying to help other people find the lost children for months, but no one believed her before. She says you and Agent Rodriguez are the first adults who didn't think she was just making things up. After Marcus hung up, the 4 officers drove in convoy back toward the industrial district. The sun was setting, Marcus said. And I'm thinking that if David Chun and Miguel Rodriguez and all those other children are really in that building, we might be the only chance they have. Maria studied Marcus's face and saw the same determination that had driven her own unofficial investigation for the past 2 years. My partner thinks I'm crazy for still believing Miguel is alive, she said. My supervisor has strongly suggested I consider a transfer to a different division. But if there's even a chance he's in there, then we find a way to get him out, Marcus said. All of them, as they sat there planning their next move, neither of them noticed the security camera that had turned to focus on their car, or the man inside the building who was now making a phone call to warn others that their operation might have been discovered. The race to save David and the other children had begun, but they weren't the only ones who were running out of time. Tell the source. If Emma has any more of these visions, I want to know about them immediately. And Mrs. Chun. Yes. Don't tell anyone else about this yet. If David is alive, if there really is some kind of operation taking children, then we need to be very careful about who we trust. The wrong person finding out about our investigation could put David and the other children in even more danger. As Sarah hung up the phone, she looked through the window of Emma's room at her sleeping daughter. Emma looked so small and fragile, fighting her own battle against an enemy that was trying to destroy her body from within. But she had also become Sarah's greatest source of hope for finding David. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She sat beside Emma's bed, holding her daughter's hand and thinking about David. For 3 years, she had tried to accept that her son was gone. She had forced herself to focus on Emma, to build a life around the family she had left rather than the one she had lost. But now, with the possibility that David might still be alive somewhere, Sarah felt something she had forgotten how to feel, determination that burned brighter than fear. Tomorrow, she would begin the search again. This time, she wouldn't be looking for a body to bury. She would be looking for a living, breathing boy who might be waiting for his mother to find him and bring him home. The morning sun was beginning to filter through the hospital windows when Emma stirred again. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Sarah with that same intense stare. "Mama," she whispered, "Zara wants to show you something today. She says David sent her a message just for you." Sarah leaned forward, ready to hear whatever her daughter had to tell her, ready to follow whatever impossible path might lead her back to her son.